the rush was all about. I mean, these changes in tax are not happening overnight. The government looked as though it sort of went into this out of careless arrogance. Why did it not get the Office for Budget Responsibility to prepare the ground properly? Why did it not indicate that there was an interest in reducing the burden of taxation, particularly the burden of direct taxation? But the ridiculous thing is, Thatcher economics was that you forced the government to cut its expenditure, and then you gave the public a benefit by cutting tax. But this wasn't anything like that. This was cutting tax out of even more borrowed money. And what I think is, although Liz Truss seems to have recovered herself, and everyone, I'm sure, wants to hope that she can get through this, because there's no point in losing another prime minister as quickly as this. And Kwasi Kwarteng, although, I think he's got real problems of credibility, hopefully he too will come through this. But the point is, there is no way at the moment in which the government commands the confidence of the markets, because this whole profound change in the income tax regime looked as though it was a rush job, and the government was blundering about, taken totally by surprise that the markets were so spooked.
And clearly there are people like Mel Stride, although he's a Rishi Sunak supporter, also the chair of the Treasury Select Committee, saying as much. So therefore, given the fact that the party's going to Birmingham now on Sunday to gather for the party conference, what does she have to do to try and regain perhaps the confidence of her own party? She can't dump the Chancellor, as you've indicated. They are joined at the hip ideologically.
Yes, and they're close associates, going back a long way. But Kwarteng is a very intelligent man. But the trouble with Kwarteng is he's still relatively inexperienced. And plainly, he thought, the way that, arrogant, smart people do think, that as long as he thought it was right, he didn't have to persuade anyone else. But of course he did. And I think the profound nature of the tax change, the most profound tax change in 50 years that I've been involved or active in or interested in politics, it just took him completely by surprise, and Truss too. So what they have got to try to do, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter so much at the moment what the public think. It will matter in due course. It doesn't matter so much what backbenchers think. It matters what the markets think. I mean, when you think that a year ago the government was borrowing money at 1% and now it's 5%, the markets will have their revenge on the government by charging the government far more than the government wants to pay to borrow money. And we'll get back into the old situation we were in the 70s and 80s, when servicing the debt, the cost of servicing the debt, became one of the biggest things on the public expenditure, current public expenditure pile. So, it won't be what you spend on the health service. It won't be what you spend on defense. It's what you spend on servicing your debt. That's an unsustainable position. And I think the problem for Kwarteng is, plainly, he has boobed. He's boobed quite seriously. The question is the price the government's going to have to pay for getting back its credibility for sound economic management to get rid of him?
David Mellor, let's take the government's argument, which is essentially that this is nothing to do, the market volatility is nothing to do with what happened last Friday in that so-called mini-budget. It's to do with the war in Ukraine. We're seeing rises in interest rates across every major economy. That's their case. Is it plausible?
Yeah, but it's not a very good case. It's totally implausible. When you think that what we regarded as basket case economies like Greece and Italy, their governments are able to borrow money more cheaply than the British government. No, I think, it's what you always say about a bad comedian. It's the way he tells them, or in this case, the way she tells them. I think the government would do far better if they admitted that in their enthusiasm to be a radical government, in their enthusiasm to take a whole lot of public expenditure away from the public, to give the public more control over their own money, they went at it a bit hard. But trying to pretend it didn't really happen, and trying to pretend that this had, the idea that what has happened on the markets had nothing whatever to do with these profound changes in income tax. I mean, it is, what is a nice word I can use without being out of order here? Cobblers. It's cobblers, isn't it? Absolute call.
Of course, yeah. David Mellor, thank you very much indeed for joining us and bringing us your view, of course, ahead of, as we say, that Tory party conference. And so, just to ask you, I gather you won't be going, is that right?
No, because at a certain point between the time I was last in office and the range of rather peculiar people that the Tories put in there as leaders, I decided I would not continue with my membership. I think it was Ian Duncan, Conservative sympathiser, and for the most time, I'm a Conservative voter. But to be a member of a party that was, is in the muddle that the Conservative Party has been in, was in at that time, it was a bit too much, really. A bit too much of a strain.
Right.
We always learn things, don't we, from David Mellor?
Independent voice of reason. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and bringing us your view. Thank you.
Coming up after the break, more on Liz Truss finally speaking out after the criticism of that mini budget.
Yes, our political reporter Catherine Foster here to tell us the mood in the Tory party. Well, you heard one mood already ahead of the conference. Stay with us for that.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Prime Minister Liz Truss has broken radio silence, as we may call it. She's been speaking to broadcasters for the first time since that reaction to the mini-budget announced on Friday and the market meltdown.
Joining us now is our political reporter, Catherine Foster. So these interviews that she's done this morning and will continue to do during the day, they've been pre-arranged. They were always going to happen. She's not suddenly come out of what some people have called hiding. What's her big message?
She's doubling down. She is absolutely committed to the plan. She thinks it's going to work. There is going to be no backtracking. What she really focused on also was this is a global issue. Globally, it's very difficult. Well, of course, that is true. I mean, the market turmoil here does seem to have dated largely from last Friday, but she was very keen to say this is because of war in Ukraine. And also, she really, really pushed the energy price freeze, which is coming in, of course, on Saturday. She was very keen. She kept coming back to that. If we hadn't done this, people would have faced bills of £6,000. Now it's going to be £2,500. She wasn't terribly clear. That's just an average. I mean, it could be a lot more than that. But obviously, that is a huge deal and a huge help. Where She was quite evasive. There were some very long pauses. There were quite a few of I don't accept.
Questions, weren't they? Yeah.
I don't accept the premise of the question. She really struggled. A question about fracking. How do you find out if there's local consent? She didn't appear to have the answer to that. She was asked by somebody else, "Can you guarantee to our listeners that their pensions are safe?" There was a pause, and then basically, well, that's the Bank of England will ensure. But also, she was asked several times about the 45p tax cut, and she basically swerved that question several times. She didn't defend it. She just moved the conversation on to broadly that tax cuts are beneficial. So it'll be interesting to see, because, of course, although that's only £2 billion of a vast sum of borrowing, that seems to have attracted...
This is the bizarre point. I mean, Chris Philp, Treasury Chief Secretary, saying, well, actually, we're not raising that much from it. So therefore, you think, well, why do it if you've got all this political fallout? And others, such as Sir Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, saying the same.
Why do it?
Political damage.
Yeah, it has attracted so much attention because they're doing it at a time that ordinary households are really worrying and facing these huge increases in costs. So, yes, it's curious. And also, the unhappiness amongst the party is becoming clearer. People are starting to come out. And, for instance, the High Peak MP Robert Largan came out and said that the tax cut was a mistake. There's now rumblings about, will she survive till Christmas? But what can they do? I mean, they've got rid of Boris Johnson because they were worried that he was an electoral liability. Now they're very worried that they might be losing seats because this is not going to play well with many, many voters. But they've just changed leader.
Yeah.
And we've had 4 leaders in 6 years, and we've had 6 chancellors. So, yeah.
And actually, those May elections next year, they're the red wall elections. So I wouldn't do anything. If I was an MP, Conservative MP, and I was feeling a bit anxious, that's your real test. I think that's the time of maximum danger. Not now. She's going to survive.
Yeah, but although obviously you've got November, where there's going to be this another mini budget with maybe another maxi impact in terms of maybe going for more kind of tax cuts. Now, David Gauke, former Tory Secretary to the Treasury, the pain is yet to come. Higher interest rates, tougher decisions on public spending. And Liz Truss herself, in these interviews, indicating that departments will have to find efficiency savings and confirming, Chris Philp, that they're sticking to existing spending limits, even though you've got inflation. I mean, this could be another, lorry heading down the hill, going to hit them face head on.
Yes, because they've said we're cutting this and this when we're borrowing. Yeah. Now they've got to say, how are you going to pay for it? And they are going to be, Chris Philp's going to be asking departments to make these efficiency savings. Well, that is cuts. Now, how are you going to make these cuts without affecting public services? She said during the leadership campaign that she was not going to be cutting public services, but this sounds rather different. Also, Chris Philp this morning was being pushed on the uprating of benefits in line with inflation that Rishi Sunak promised.
I'm just
He's not confirming that either.
Yeah. Bring some breaking news coming in from Florida. The President has declared a state of emergency there because we're getting now news as daybreak there that it's left hundreds of people dead. This is the Storm Ian, Category 4 storm. Indications coming in, 2.5 million people without power, but hundreds dead is the latest assessment as the emergency service get to grips with that.
We'll bring you more on that later in the show. Coming up after your news updates, we're also going to get the latest on the royal family after Windsor Castle welcomes the public back after the Queen's death.
Good afternoon, it's 12:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic plans, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England launched a £65 billion government bond buying programme in an attempt to stabilise the UK economy. Ms Truss says Britain has taken decisive action to help people get through a difficult winter.
It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis. It was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, that we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. From next month, the average household energy bill will rise by at least 25% to a capped £2,500. Russia's to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine following so-called referendums. President Vladimir Putin is to hold a signing ceremony in Moscow tomorrow for the 4 territories, which include Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. And Hollywood actress Michelle Pfeiffer and musician Snoop Dogg have led tributes to US rapper Coolio, who's died aged 59. The artist was best known for the 1990 song Gangsta's Paradise. The Dangerous Minds actress wrote Heartbroken, a life cut entirely too short. Coolio's exact cause of death yesterday hasn't yet been revealed. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark and Gloria will be right back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio.
and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB Newsday. Now, householders being advised to read and then submit their energy meter readings before Saturday, ahead, of course, of that planned price rise.
This will stop suppliers from estimating usage and charging a higher rate for energy used before the 1st of October.
Well, of course, from next month, the price cap for the average annual household energy bill rising from what was $1,971 to $2,500, still an increase, of course, of 27%. But that cap frozen effectively by the government, determining the cost per unit. But bills, remember, calculated by how much energy is used.
Government announced the energy price cap would be frozen until 2024 in an effort to limit soaring energy costs. Joining us now is Fraser Scott, the Chief Executive of Energy Action Scotland. Fraser, just explain why it is so important to do your reading tomorrow or the day after, really.
Well, the energy price guarantee announced last week, which was welcome, provides some certainty. But the other consequence of it is that increase in the unit cost for gas and electricity. They are going to rise a further approximately 25 to 27% gas or electricity. So that's going to happen on Saturday. So what's really, really important is that people who have accurate meter readings, they should not be overcharged for any energy that they've consumed when energy was priced at the lower rate. It is vitally important that people take advice, get help to maybe read your meter if it's difficult for you to reach it, because some of them are like several feet off the ground, for example, in people's homes. It's so important that people do that, not to be overcharged. This could cost millions of pounds across Britain if people were overcharged for it, simply one day's energy. So it's so important.
I guess you're effectively lending that energy supply your money while they sort of sort out the bill. But the other aspect is, are they actually ready to receive all these RETA meetings? One can imagine if everyone's trying to do it with all the energy companies tomorrow and into the weekend, you know, their systems could fall over.
Yeah, this is definitely a big meter read, and we are asking people to do it. Yes, I suspect systems will struggle to cope. Telephone lines and websites may indeed struggle. They struggled in April when we asked households to do a similar thing, because we were facing a 54% increase in April. This is a combination of incredibly high prices. It is really important that people take their meter readings. If you can't get through, make sure you maybe take a photograph, get it time-stamped, so that you can do this over a few days after Saturday, because we believe that there will be tolerance amongst the suppliers for late meter readings, but it is so important. Prices rising 1st of October on Saturday by over 25% on top of rises that we've already had. I mean, I will say this, that despite that financial support that government's provided, the net effect is still energy prices that are more than double the amount they were in 2020. People are absolutely struggling and will be desperate this winter. And £2,500 is not an amount that someone's energy bill will ever be capped at, not unless you're that average user. It can be higher, it can be lower.
Fraser, I want to ask you about that because, as you say, it's the cap on the average annual household bill. Can you tell us how the best way to make sure you don't exceed the average household cap? Can you give us any practical tips, or are we all going to sort of go over it anyway?
I mean, it's very difficult to give that kind of advice because there are many reasons why people may have much higher levels of consumption. Some households need to have much higher levels of consumption because they have medical needs, essential medical needs, or perhaps they're older people and they need to live in a warmer home than perhaps younger households do. So, you know, there are a lot of reasons why people's consumption may be higher. I mean, the key questions are around affordability. And if household energy is simply unaffordable, people will simply go without, and that will damage their health and well-being, and it will lead to further costs for our National Health Service, and it will lead to a greater amount of deaths over this winter period, all of which is incredibly damaging to society. Simply unacceptable, not right, not fair in the 21st century. It shouldn't have to be this way. Yes, if you can take steps to reduce your consumption safely, then I would urge people to do so. Simple things from turning thermostats down 1 degree, if that is comfortable for you. You know, washing your clothes at 30 degrees, not heating rooms that you're not in, closing your curtains when it gets dark in the winter. All of those things can have an effect which will help reduce your costs. But this is going to be an incredibly difficult winter. Record amounts of debt, record amounts of people who have been disconnecting from their energy supply. This will be an incredibly damaging winter, without a doubt.
Fraser, we've talked about the cost per unit of electricity and the cap, but the other issue that people are getting in touch about is the standing charges that are coming through on bills. What can we actually do about that? Because clearly a lot of the price comparison websites where you could switch suppliers, they seem to really have said, well, you know, there are not that many deals out there now.
You're right. There are no real good fixed deals for anyone at this point in time in the market. If there is something that is good for you, it'll be with your existing supplier. People are simply not moving companies because we're all largely paying the same price for our energy. You're right to speak about standing charges. Now, they vary across GB quite considerably. So in Scotland, for example, it's about 50 pence a day for electricity and about 30 pence a day for gas, but that can vary in other parts of Britain. Down in London, it's considerably less for electricity on that standing charge. these are unavoidable costs. They have to be levied by your supplier because these are regulated costs identified by the regulator Ofgem to do with network charges and upgrades and the cost of failed businesses.
Fraser, let's give the government some credit. Every household is going to get cost of living payments. Those more vulnerable will get additional help. So I know you say it's going to be a really, really difficult winter, but we should acknowledge that the government are putting money into everybody's energy account and that the most vulnerable will get higher amounts.
Yep, certainly there is some scaled financial support being provided by the UK government, and that is absolutely welcome by every single household that receives that. But it simply will not go far enough. And there are some big gaps in that space right now. There's uncertainty for households who heat their homes with anything other than gas or electricity, so oil, LPG, solid fuels. People who live in an area that's perhaps served by a heat network, they've still got uncertainty right now about the kind of support that they might receive. So I will still say that government needs to go further because it's not getting us into a place where the health and well-being of people will not suffer to the huge extent that we all predict. I mean, each year, thousands of people lose their lives living in fuel poverty. The consequence of being unable to afford their energy and living in a home that is cold and damp, it can only rise this winter because we are at a place that is far from 2019, 2020. You know, energy costs are double. Despite all that financial support, it is still a doubling of energy costs that people are going to experience from the 1st of October.
Fraser, thank you very much. Fraser Scott, CEO of Energy Action Scotland. And, of course, we'll speak to you again after October and see how people are coping up there in Scotland. Thanks very much indeed.
Windsor Castle has welcomed the public back for the first time since the Queen's burial today.
Yes, the castle's opened at 10 this morning. It's allowing visitors to see the Queen's final resting place, viewing the new ledger stone that's been installed, inscribed with her name. That's in the George VI Memorial Chapel, of course.
Our royal reporter Cameron Walker is there now to tell us more. Good afternoon, Cameron. Are there queues? Are we back to queues to pay respects?
Good afternoon, Gloria. Yes, you are exactly right. There were queues even before the castle gates opened this morning at 10 o'clock. There were hundreds of people queuing at the gates. Granted, the tickets are very much time allocated, so they were expecting that many people, but nonetheless, it was quite an impressive sight. And one of the people who queues is with me now, Professor Chris Imafidden, the chairman of the Excellence in Education, which is a charity, actually, which the Queen actually supported throughout her reign. But first of all, before we start talking about your experience with Her Majesty the Queen, just describe the atmosphere in St George's Chapel where the Queen's finally laid to rest.
Deeply spiritual, very surreal, very, very moving. Totally different from the lying state that we saw in Westminster.
In what way?
This time you've seen her reunited with her family and saying, oh, really, this is really the end of the era. When you saw her name on that plaque, I mean, everyone was absolutely speechless, and it was very overwhelming.
I bet it was. And you mentioned, of course, she's buried with her family there. What was your instant reaction of seeing that new ledger stone that's been placed there?
Oh, she's joined the ancestors. She's left in the sand of time a footprint that cannot be erased. She's shaking the entire global community. She was not just the Queen of the United Kingdom and the Realm and Commonwealth. Other countries have seen a woman demonstrate to us leadership skills beyond doubt.
And there were flowers, of course, as well around.
Yeah, autumnal flowers there, beautiful aroma and beautiful to behold with the eyes.
So talk to me about your experience of meeting Her Majesty the Queen, as you did on several occasions. What was she like and what did she do for your charity?
Very personal. She's someone that is very keen in the welfare of everybody, regardless of your postcode, regardless of your ethnicity. And these were children and students from disadvantaged backgrounds, some of them from very troubled homes. And when they were invited to come to the palace, either to get the Duke of Edinburgh Award or any other recognition, the way they left they were so convinced now that they were important, because remember, they used to see the Queen on the back of a stamp, on the coin, and on the note. But this time they saw her live. Said, is it the same Queen that sits on the throne and addresses Parliament, that I'm in her presence? It changed their self-importance and their sense of their self-esteem.
Amazing, what an experience. What did she say to them?
Oh, she will ask them, oh, what's your name? So, my name is Thomas. Okay, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an engineer. Oh, yeah, you can be that. What's your name? My name is Grace. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a linguist. Oh, you can do that. So she reinforced life ambitions and goals for those children without knowing. And when they went back to school and they were now working and said, no, I want to be an engineer, the teacher would say, no, you can't. You are not in the top set for maths. Say, no, even the Queen said, I can be. So that resonated with kids. And I mean, a lady called Omotola Karele, nobody in her family has ever been to university before. Today, she's a graduate of Magdalen College, Oxford, partly because of the Excellence in Education program.
It's an incredible effect Her Majesty the Queen had on people, and we saw that, a bit of an outpouring of that at Her Majesty the Queen's funeral, which you were actually at. You were inside Westminster Abbey. Tell me what that was like.
Okay, that was another occasion. That was just a totally different level, with the hymns, our favorite hymns being sung, with the everybody really moved, very emotional. We had to bring out our tissues, and while the camera was off, we have to wipe a few tears, because this is a lady that meant so much to every single person, not in her position, but in her persona, not in the institution which she represented, but in the individual she was to people.
I suppose that was one of her great strengths. It was actually being able to speak to everybody, someone who was a US president or someone who was in Hackney.
Or somebody in Peckham, or somebody that's out of the council estate, and say, oh, you really mean I'm that important? Because her importance is here. My importance is there. But she now pulls me up and says, no, don't worry. Every single individual has a talent. And our school system, our society must recognize that and make sure that talent is developed so that we contribute to society. That's a legacy. Those were the words I heard again echoing today.
Chris, thank you very much for speaking to me here on GB News.
Pleasure.
We've heard it here, Her Majesty's legacy lives on, and the public can go and see her final resting place every day, actually, apart from Tuesdays and Wednesdays when the castle is closed. But tickets are available now.
And Cam, it's great to see people back there at the castle. Just to reiterate that the stone, the Ledger Stone, as they call it now, and the final resting place, this is the very small George VI chapel. So how long do people have there to pay their respects?
Yeah, so we've got St George's Chapel, which is the big chapel, and then an annex of that chapel is, as you said, King George VI Memorial Chapel, and that is where Her Majesty the Queen is interred with her father, King George VI, her mother, the Queen Mother, and her late husband, Prince Philip, and her sister's ashes are also there as well. And from speaking to people earlier today, it was very much a long queue to get into St George's Chapel, and then again, because there were so many people trying to pay their respects, they were only allowed to spend a little short amount of time actually peering into King George VI Memorial Chapel to look at that new Ledger Stone. They were trying to get as many people through as possible and not cause too much of a queue, as it were, but of course, understandably, people wanted to pay their respects.
Here for a ticket.
Cameron, what was that, sorry, Gloria?
Do you have to pay for a ticket to the people? We can see people queuing up now. Are tickets on sale?
Yes, so tickets are on sale. It's the Royal Collection Trust who organises the ticket sales. I believe they're about £26.50 for an adult, which sounds a lot. But if you remember, the reason why Windsor Castle is open to the public is following that major fire in 1992, which gutted most of the states' rooms, and the royal family needed to find a way to pay for that, and they didn't want to take taxpayers-funded money to pay for this renovation work. So that's why they opened up Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle for the paying public to see where they live and how the working palace operates.
Lovely. Cameron, thank you very much for updating us there in Windsor. Well wrapped up with that very impressive scarf. Looking very smart. Thank you very much indeed.
The Prime Minister has done some interviews this morning to defend her mini-budget, and Chris Philp, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, was sent to do a national broadcast round. I bet he was loving that news. But he, he came out, he defended the government's plans, and here he's what he had to say to GB News about the mini-budget last Friday.
Firstly, if you look at the growth plan measures announced by the Chancellor last Friday, only 1/20th, that's less than 5%, were the removal of the top rate of tax. Most of those measures were things like cutting the basic rate of income tax, reversing the national insurance increase, reducing or keeping low taxes on companies, which benefit, everybody. The income tax cut and the national insurance cut benefit every single worker, 30 million people in the United Kingdom. The energy intervention was very important as well. We're making sure that people don't suffer those £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 bills they feared just a few weeks ago. We've made sure the British public don't suffer from those terrible energy bills. So almost everything in that package was targeted at sort of the whole country, not just a few people. That's the first point to make. The second point to make on the 45p specifically is that we want to make sure the United Kingdom is internationally competitive for personal tax and for corporate tax, because many companies and also very successful people have a choice about where they locate. They don't have to come to the UK, they could locate in New York or they could locate in Singapore. We want to make sure they choose to come and grow in the United Kingdom, which is good for our economy. It'll create extra jobs. It'll ultimately pay more tax revenues to fund the NHS, education and the police as well. So that is the rationale for doing it.
Chris Philp speaking to us a little earlier, as you're saying, that's the worst job anyone in government could have at the moment, to go out and speak to broadcasters.
It's a tough gig, but
yeah,
that's what we pay. That's what we pay.
Interesting. More reaction coming through. Unions now reacting to what they've been hearing from Liz Truss and Chris Philp and others. Unison are now calling for a general election in response to the financial crisis. Christina McKenna saying ministers must listen to the world's economic experts, urging them to junk this disastrous financial experiment.
She was a guest on GB News from Liverpool on Monday. I don't think there's going to be a general election, do you?
No, but clearly they've got a Tory party conference in Birmingham, which might be, again, a little local difficulty for them.
We'll be talking to Liam Halligan at the top of the hour. Before that, it's the weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine Thursday for most places. A little bit warmer than recent days as well, because the winds are a touch lighter. But make the most of today, because wet and windy weather is on the way, brewing up out here in the Atlantic. Still got a fair distance to travel, however. That is arriving tomorrow. Today we've got a couple of weather fronts. This one's clearing away, brought some heavy rain overnight, disappearing now from the Channel Isles. And there's another line of showers just coming in across parts of Lincolnshire into northwest England, and that'll develop into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia this afternoon. So a scattering of showers here, but elsewhere most places dry, some sunny spells. It's still a touch below average for most, with mid to high teens at best, but the winds are lighter than they have been, and it doesn't feel too bad in the sunny spells. Those showers will drift further across the Midlands through this evening before tending to fizzle out. One or two keeping going into North Norfolk for a while, but most having a dry Friday evening. And with the clear skies across England and Wales, we'll see some fog patches developing. Quite a chilly night here as well, but all change in the northwest. Those weather fronts arrive, bringing a very different day on Friday across Scotland, Northern Ireland. Rain from the word go for Northern Ireland, spreading across Scotland. Heavy bursts of rain and gusty winds, particularly initially across northwest Scotland and then across northeast Scotland in the afternoon. Turning windy across England and Wales. East Anglia, the southeast, probably won't see any rain until very late in the day, but elsewhere we'll see that wet weather arriving across England and Wales during the afternoon. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with that wind and heavy rain, which will push quickly-ish across the country. So we're looking at 3-4 hours worth of rain, eventually getting to East Anglia and the southeast during Friday evening. So bear that in mind if you are heading out. As we head into the weekends, well, still blustery on Saturday, but not as windy, with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Not many showers in the east, dry and bright for most of us on Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
on TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Very warm welcome back to GB Newsday with Gloria and me, Mark Longhurst.
The Prime Minister has surfaced to defend her economic plans after widespread criticism.
And in international news, Russia says now it will annex 4 regions in eastern Ukraine after those what we'll call sham referendums. We'll be there live for you.
All that and much more. First, it's your latest news with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Gloria. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic strategy, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond buying programme. Ms Truss says Britain's taken decisive action to help people get through a difficult winter.
It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis. It was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. From next month, the average household energy bill will rise by at least 25% to a capped £2,500. Meanwhile, the government's rolling out £1.5 billion in funding to help improve energy efficiency and slash bills. The Help to Heat scheme will see around 130,000 low-income households get an energy upgrade in their home, including installing heat pumps and solar panels. It'll also help people save up to £700 a year on bills. Local authorities will be able to apply for funding from early next year. The Criminal Bar Association is considering whether to ballot barristers on ending strike action following new proposals in the row over pay. The Ministry of Justice says the government's now offering a further investment of £54 million in solicitors and the criminal bar. The CBA hasn't confirmed the ballot, but is said to be considering the terms on offer. A US citizen accused of killing a 19-year-old motorcyclist in Northamptonshire is set to appear in a UK court for the first time today. Anne Sakoulas is accused of causing death by dangerous driving after Harry Dunn was killed in a collision outside a military base in August 2019. Sakoulas has been granted diplomatic immunity but is expected to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link from America later. Russia is to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine tomorrow following so-called referendums on becoming part of the country. President Putin will hold a signing ceremony in Moscow for the territories across southern and eastern Ukraine, including Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. Sweden has reported a new leak in a major undersea pipeline carrying Russian natural gas to the EU. It's the 4th leak to the Nord Stream pipeline reported this week by either Sweden or Denmark. The European Union suspects they've been caused by sabotage. Russia's dismissed suggestions it's attacked its own pipelines. The US president has declared a major disaster in the state of Florida after a powerful storm hit the country. Joe Biden has ordered government funding to help with the recovery of Hurricane Ian, which has left nearly 2.5 million homes and businesses without power. At its strongest, it was classified a catastrophic Category 4 storm. It flooded coastal towns along Florida's Gulf Coast and left homes in ruins with winds of up to 150 miles per hour. And another reason to call a dog a man's best friend. A new study suggests canines can sniff out stress in our sweat or our breath. 4 dogs successfully identified the majority of samples of sweat or breath that had been taken from a stressed person. That's after completing a tricky maths problem. The researchers at Queen's University Belfast hope their study will help in the training of therapy dogs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark and Gloria.
Rihanna, thank you very much.
This morning, the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has spoken to regional broadcasters defending her plans for tax cuts.
I think we have to look at what situation this country would be in if we hadn't acted. People were facing fuel bills, energy bills of up to £6,000. We had very high inflation expectations and an economic slowdown. And what we've done is we've taken decisive action. First of all, to make sure that nobody is paying more than a typical fuel bill of £2,500. That will come in this Saturday. But also to reduce our tax burden, to make sure we grow the economy and also curb inflation. And that's so important. It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis brought about by Putin's war in Ukraine. And what was right is that Britain took decisive action to help people get through what is going to be a difficult winter.
Is it credible to suggest that the mini-budget on Friday didn't have an impact on what has happened over the last few days? Are you really suggesting that?
Well, the biggest measure in the mini-budget was the support we have given to people on their energy bills. And it was absolutely right that we gave that support, because without that support, people would be facing high fuel bills this winter. I was worried about people struggling to heat their homes, but also we would have seen businesses like pubs go out of business. So it was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, that we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Okay, just on delivery then, we're being told already that government departments are looking for efficiencies. They're being told to look for efficiencies. Where on earth are those efficiencies going to come from?
It's absolutely right that we always need to get value for taxpayers' money. Every pound that we take from somebody is a pound they could be spending on their future, on their what they need to support themselves. So it's right that we get value for money, and I'm always making sure that we deliver that.
Where from? How are you going to do it?
Well, there are always ways that we can organise things more efficiently, but what I want to make sure is taxpayer money is focused on frontline services, on getting our GP appointments, making sure people can get to see a doctor, making sure we deliver on our road projects, all of those things that people rely on us for. But there are plenty of areas where the government can become more efficient.
Can you give me an example?
Well, not at the moment. We're continually reviewing to make sure we're getting good value for money, and I think that's what taxpayers expect.
So that's Liz Truss, Prime Minister, eventually speaking to the cameras. Of course, one of the questions when she was on local radio, apparently earlier this morning, where have you been? But certainly she's out there now putting her case. We'll get the views now of our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. It is you.
Hello, Mr. Mark Longbottom.
Yeah, some would say that, wouldn't they? Some great questions, actually, from the listeners on radio. What on earth were you thinking of? One of those questions.
Indeed, she's come out to bat eventually, a very staunch defence of her tax-cutting strategy. Every pound that we take from people in tax is pound that they can't spend on themselves and their family. And also a frisson there with something that she said, talking about Whitehall savings, tax cuts, but also cuts in spending to try and balance the books. I know from talking to Liz Truss over many years, as she's done various cabinet jobs, including Chief Secretary to the Treasury, number 2, another journalist will tell you the same. She's often expressed disbelief at the inefficiency of government, at the inefficiency within some of our public services. She mentioned the NHS there. So it may be that despite the cost of living crisis, despite angst that a lot of people feel about making ends meet, there could be slightly less government spending for some departments too, even though costs of providing public services are also going up because of inflation.
Liam, if it was that easy to find efficiencies in public spending, a government that would have been in for 12 years might have found them by now. I put it to you.
And it's a point very well made, Gloria. Every budget I've ever covered, decades in journalism, there's always a sort of efficiency savings, a kind of big black box to make the rest of my numbers add up.
Cutting red tape.
Yeah, cutting red tape.
Yeah, that's
tax
another
evasion.
one.
You know?
Yeah.
There's all... So... But for her, OK, I completely agree with you, but you know better than anyone, Gloria, politics is about timing. And to use that efficiency savings line at a time like now, when her back is up against the wall, when people are calling for her Chancellor's head in resignation, then for her to say, I think we can make government more efficient, it's doubling down on her strategy. She's not apologising for cutting the top rate of tax. And look, under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have to. They're cutting the top rate of tax to 40%, where it was throughout the whole of the new Labour years, bar a couple of months at the end, when Gordon Brown raised it to 50% to cause the Tories a problem when they eventually cut it. But it's about timing. She's trying to sound defiant, resolute, determined, not for turning. Remind you of anybody?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe not the Iron Lady, but the sort of copper-bottomed lady, who knows. But looking at what the markets have done, the volatility seems to have sort of dissipated a moment.
Yeah.
What happens next? Because obviously there are those like Gerard Lyons, the economist you know well, even Sir Mark Carney, the Bank of England former governor, basically saying it was the way that they presented this. So are they going to have to rethink what happens in November when we're going to get the next tax indications and plans being put out there?
I think it's all in the balance, Mark, and I think Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss, like me, I'm walking around literally with my phone open on pound dollar, 10-year gilt yield, and the price of wholesale gas. And I'm checking them every 5 minutes, because if I see a move, I'm going to come in this studio and tell...
You just barge in.
Tell you...
And it happened yesterday that way, didn't it? Suddenly it was woof.
It looks calm for now, OK? It looks as if early days, that very important but technical and slightly difficult to get your head around Bank of England intervention yesterday worked. What does that mean for people at home if that sticks? It means interest rates won't need to go up as much as they otherwise would have. Right. It means the pound isn't going to plunge, making the cost of living squeeze even tighter, because all our imports, including imported energy, including oil for petrol and diesel, then becomes more expensive. It looks calm for now, but it could change at any minute.
We've had some viewers and listeners getting in touch. We want to put some of those to you. So Dave says the problem with the current currency fluctuations are down to one thing. Financial sharks like those in the City of London, they have seen issues and have piled in to short the pound and make money. Does Dave have a point?
Dave does have a point, and he clearly has some experience of financial markets, or he's certainly read widely, because he's used the phrase there, to short the pound. What does that mean? OK, what that means is you make a bet that the pound is going to fall, and then you make money off a falling pound. You can make money, you can short a stock if you think some bad news is about to emerge about a particular company. You can short its stock, so make money out of the fall. So you bet against something. That's very easy to do with something called a derivative. You have to take my word for it. And Dave's right. I personally think there are currency traders who get together on WhatsApp groups and they think, OK, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, for whatever reason, they've clearly made a real political error here, right? It's tone deaf to lower the top rate of tax, and to do it just before a Labour conference. Obviously, the media is going to absolutely pile in. They don't care that they're just lowering it to the same rate where Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had it.
But there wasn't a recession, or there wasn't an economic turmoil, and arguably Labour introduced it when there was the financial crisis.
Exactly right, Gloria, exactly right. Labour introduced that rate of tax then. It was different times, different horses for different courses. You can defend lowering that rate of tax, but the financial markets could see the media was going to give these guys a kicking because it looked politically inept. Now, if there's a general mood that the media is going to give the market a kicking, give the government a kicking, that's an opportunity, right, for traders. They can see the government's under pressure. They can see that they're on the back foot. They can see that they could elicit from the government, from the Bank of England, some kind of intervention, which then they could double down and trade again and try and make lots of money, as Dave said, off that short selling.
Similar point, actually, from Judith, who's written to say you're spot on about what's going on in the economy at the moment. It's the financial markets taking on the government. Does anyone honestly believe that 45 billion tax cut is what this is all about? All governments have been borrowing like crazy for years. But, of course, the problem is when you are a free market government, you've actually got to accept what the free market tells you, you know.
But even if you're not a free market government, you know, even Clement Attlee's government, right, after the Second World War, you know, arguably the most socialist government we've ever had. We can debate, you know, whether I think they did some good things, they did some bad things, but that's a very non-free market government. But they still lived in a world where the pound and the dollar was traded. The UK still had one of the biggest stock markets in the world. This, you know, almost all countries in the world, even ones that are pretty statist, have financial markets because they are, you know, they're tumultuous, but they are the lifeblood of commerce. Without them, we'd have very few of the facilities and the artefacts which make up a modern life.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me put to you what Godfrey says. Sorry, did I just interrupt you?
No. I was just to say we've got one more. Yeah.
This interest rate rise is inevitable. You can't endlessly print money to suppress interest rates. The global elites have dictated this policy, and the UK had no choice but participate, Liam.
Quantitative easing that you were talking about yesterday.
Well, Godfrey's definitely onto something. I have been writing and talking to GB News colleagues a lot in recent days. This is a global phenomenon. Look, if Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss never entered the House of Commons in their life, interest rates would be going up now a lot. They're going up a lot around the world. The Bank of Japan, the central bank of the world's third biggest economy, has just done a very similar intervention into the long end of their yield curve. Funny language, but exactly the same thing that we've just done over there on the other side of the world. This is happening all over the world. Interest rates in America have gone up far more than anywhere else in the Western world. And that's kind of part of the story, Mark. This is a strong dollar story. The whole world has fallen against the dollar. All the major currencies in the world have fallen against the dollar, some of them by more than the pound. It's just that we focus on the pound, and in many ways the world focuses on the pound. Pound, dollar. It's called cable because it's the first ever electronically traded currency with a cable that we laid underneath the Atlantic Ocean. It's when global financial markets were born. It was the first move. The whole world looks at cable, as they call it, the pound-dollar exchange rate, as a kind of virility symbol, a litmus test of where the world economy is. And if cable is volatile, you know that you're in for some financial turmoil.
Yeah, and just very quickly, some of those speculators may have got their fingers a bit singed because we're at, what, 108, 109 at the moment? So
They may, but they will come again. They will come again. What I would say is that if I was a currency dealer and I was working with people around the world to try and really get short the pound and really cause some turmoil, I'd be waiting for a Tory conference, because that is when the government will be most vulnerable. Maybe a bit of speculation, maybe the day of her speech.
Ouch. Right, thank you. You're going to Birmingham. Watch out. Coming up after the break.
We're going to be talking about how the Kremlin has announced that 4 regions of Ukraine will be incorporated into Russia tomorrow. Before that, a short break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB Newsday. Now, let's remind you of the case of a US citizen accused of killing a 19-year-old motorcyclist outside a US military base in Northamptonshire. Well, she's set to appear in a UK court for the first time today.
Anne Sakoulas is accused of causing death by dangerous driving after Harry Dunn was killed in a collision outside a military base in August 2019. Sakoulas had been granted diplomatic immunity but is expected to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link from the US later today. And now we can speak to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who's at Westminster Magistrates Court. What's the timeline on events today? Because 2019 was when Harry Dunn lost his life. It's a long time.
Well, it's 2 o'clock this afternoon that we're expecting that appearance. She will be appearing, as you said, we're told, via video link into Westminster Magistrates Court. It's a bit of a head scratcher, this one, in that normally you would get your first appearance at a magistrates court after you had been charged with a crime, and if it's a serious crime then of course it's referred up to the Crown Court. But as far as we know, Anne Sakoulas has not been charged with any crime because, as you pointed out in your introduction there, she left the UK for the United States shortly after that fatal road crash in August of 2019, and she's never been back since. There have been repeated attempts by the UK government initially to get her extradition, but she is eligible to diplomatic immunity through her husband because of the job he did in this communications base in Northamptonshire. He was afforded diplomatic immunity, and then, of course, that passed on to his close relatives as well. So she has not been coming back. The US government turned down a request by the UK government to extradite her. Dominic Raab, when he was Foreign Secretary, tried over a number of months to see about a potential way forward, and it seems a solution they've come up with is some kind of a court appearance and court process. But quite what that will be if she never comes to the UK, we're not sure, because at the end of the day, if there is some sort of a process with a finding of fact, there can't really be a sentence handed down, because that sentence would not be enforceable to anyone outside the jurisdiction of this particular court. So perhaps that will become a little clearer after 2 o'clock this afternoon. We might get an outline of what exactly is going to happen. You never know, she might surprise us all and decide she's coming to the UK after all, but it doesn't seem likely, given that her lawyers have always maintained from day one that she would not be returning to the UK.
Given that the strange circumstances of this particular hearing, and as we mentioned, the issue of diplomatic immunity, does that have a bearing on how the case is reported? Could there be reporting restrictions applied?
I'm not so sure there would be that much in the way of reporting restrictions, especially if we're talking about a case where someone has not actually been charged yet with a crime. They're not in the jurisdiction of the court. Normal contempt of court processes would not appear to apply in this particular case. But as I say, we really need to get a proper handle on that when the court resumes at 2 o'clock this afternoon and we hear exactly what is planned. We know that the UK authorities, the British government, want to do all they can for the family of Harry Dunn to try to get them some sort of justice. But it may, in the end of the day, be a bit of a fudge, unfortunately, if we've got some kind of process which is a finding of fact that then cannot result in any criminal sanction, then I'm not sure that the family of Harry Dunn will be happy with that. They are here today. They arrived about half an hour ago, half a dozen of them, close family members, to listen to what is said in court at 2 o'clock.
Thank you very much for the moment. Back to you, of course, after 2 and to get the latest of what's happening there. Thanks very much indeed.
Now, an inquest into the suicide of 14-year-old Molly Russell in 2017 continues this week.
Yes, she'd viewed extensive suicide and self-harm related posts on social media in the months before she died. Well, Molly's family have now called for better internet safety.
Let's speak to our London reporter, Alice Porter, who can give us the latest from the inquest. Alice, tell us what we've learned.
Well, coroners have the opportunity of raising concerns over someone's death in order to prevent future deaths, and we're going to have that in full tomorrow from Andrew Walker. But we did get a flavour of what he will be saying tomorrow in his comments just now earlier in court, and he talked about, with the arrival of the internet, the risks that it posed, and he said that one benefit of this inquest is to recognise and to take action of that risk we have so embraced in our homes, which needs to be kept away from children completely. He talked about the separate sites needed for children on social media and said that this is an opportunity to make the internet safe. We mustn't let it slip away. We must do it. So quite a strong rhetoric there from the coroner who is involved with this inquest, because it's important to stress this is very much a landmark case. Never before have we had a 14-year-old social media record so carefully analysed, but that was very much as a result of the family who've been campaigning, as you said in your introduction there, for a long time, and the struggles they had to just even get the data in order to analyse it. WhatsApp, for example, deleted all of Molly Russell's messages. So what we've had in court, we've heard from Pinterest, and we've also heard from Meta, that are the company strategy behind Instagram, and some of the evidence that was in court was incredibly damning. I mean, to give an example, for some of the photos and the quotes were so disturbing we couldn't even broadcast them. And the concerns have been raised is that children have been allowed to view them, and then even one of the senior executives for Pinterest that he said he wouldn't allow his children to view the images. And I actually last night had a quick look on Instagram and very quickly was able to find some quite disturbing pictures and quotes. And so I think this will be very much, as I say, a landmark case in many ways in terms of putting pressure on social media companies who, to be fair, since Molly Russell's suicide in 2017, have made a number of steps to make the internet safer, to make social media safer for children. But there will be others who argue that it's not going farther enough, that they are still putting profits over the safety of children. And I think the concerns raised tomorrow that we hear in full as the inquest comes to an end after 2 weeks of hearing evidence from many, many people, it will be really interesting to see what the comments are and how it changes the landscape when it comes to social media.
Indeed, Alice, thank you very much indeed for that. And of course, we'll see, as you say, what the coroner has to say and indeed what the reaction will be from the social media companies. Thanks very much indeed.
76 protesters have now been killed in Iran by security forces following a death of a woman in custody. It also sparked protests here outside the Iranian embassy. We'll have more on this for you after the news update.
It's coming up to 1:30. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic strategy, calling Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England launched a £65 billion government bond-buying programme in an attempt to stabilise the UK economy. Liz Truss says her government's taken decisive action to help people get through a difficult winter ahead.
It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis. It was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. From next month, the average household energy bill will rise by at least 25% to an average £2,500. Russia's to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine following so-called referendums. President Putin is to hold a signing ceremony in Moscow tomorrow for the 4 territories, which include Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. And Hollywood actress Michelle Pfeiffer and musician Snoop Dogg have led tributes to US rapper Coolio, who's died aged 59. The artist was best known for his 1990s hit Gangsta's Paradise. The Dangerous Minds actress wrote, "Heartbroken, a life cut entirely too short." Coolio's exact cause of death yesterday hasn't been revealed. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark and Gloria will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Protests have taken place across the world after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who was detained by morality police in Iran for not completely covering her hair with a hijab.
Yeah, latest assessments from Iran that 76 people have been killed so far in the protests there. And these were the scenes, to remind you, in London, where police had to try and defend the embassy from that group there. These were the pictures filmed from inside the embassy, and many police were hurt, some of them quite seriously, and had to be treated in hospital. We're joined now by Hussein Abedini, Deputy Director of the National Council of Resistance in Iran. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What's the latest that you're getting from Iran? Because, of course, very difficult for independent media to assess what the situation is.
Thank you for having me. And this is actually the 14th day of the uprising in Iran. And although everything started from the tragic death and brutal killing of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, but now this has been like a spark which has exploded. The gunpowder battle. Of course, Iran has been ready to erupt for a number of years, and the supreme leader of the Iranian regime, Ali Khamenei, actually used the coronavirus pandemic for 2.5 years since 2019 uprising to make a shield against a huge uprising. But things in Iran are very volatile. We are in the midst of a massive uprising which will lead to a democratic revolution. So according to our figures from inside Iran, until last night, at least 240 people have already been killed in 162 cities throughout Iran, and some 12,000 people have been arrested, as well as countless number of people who have been injured with bullet shots. So the situation is very volatile, and the people, despite all the suppressive measures, they are coming to the streets. In a city like Tehran with 10 million population, in scores of districts in Tehran, there are massive demonstrations going on. So if I tell you very briefly, this is very much resembling, the days of the overthrow of the Shah's regime. And I can tell you that there are features that the most important of which is the organized nature of the protest, which has led now to their persistence and resilience. The work of the resistance units of the People's Mujahideen of Iran as the main opposition movement is very important, and the protests are nationwide. The cities and provinces that were largely quiet during the previous uprising in 2009 and 2019 have now risen up with unified slogans demanding the downfall of the regime in its entirety, chanting their slogans in the clearest form and focusing on the highest authority of the regime, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. You most probably have seen many videos which the people are shouting, death to Khamenei, death to the dictator. And they say that all these armies have come together to target the supreme leader. Another feature of this uprising is simultaneous protests in large cities like Tehran, where, as I said, sometimes in many locations of Tehran, there have been demonstrations.
Could I just put the point to you made by Tehran's police chief, who said the death of Mahsa Amini was an unfortunate incident he does not want repeated. How did that go down? What was the response to that it was an unfortunate incident?
Well, this is absolutely a big lie, because all the people who were present when Mahsa Amini, the innocent girl, was arrested. She was actually hit by an officer, and her head, was injured, and all the blood, was coming from her ear. So all the indications show that this was a brutal killing. This is not the first time Mahsa Amini is not the first victim of the regime. And because this regime has been responsible for tens of thousands of executions since this brutal fascist dictatorship has come to power. The people of Iran have already sacrificed, according to our information based on the People's Mujahideen of Iran, 120,000 people have already been executed. And the 1,500 people were brutally murdered during the 2019 uprising. The number of executions just in 1 year of Raisi being the president of the regime has doubled. So this is a ruthless regime, and the right of the Iranian people to overthrow this regime really has to be recognized, because this is what we are asking, the international community, because this is the inalienable right of the Iranian people to rebel and fight against the regime. This has to be recognized. This is also in the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which, if you allow me just to quote it, it says, whereas it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. So this is what we are asking the international community to do.
Indeed. As you were speaking, we're seeing some pictures there from Iran of people cutting off their hair in protest at what's happened. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, who, of course, was detained there, has also done the same here in the UK. So clearly, this is actually getting worldwide support. However, in Iran, obviously, we've got Raisi saying that they will not accept chaos. I mean, it could well be that this leads to further crackdowns by the regime there.
It is absolutely true, that the women, first of all, are the driving force of this massive uprising, and they are shattering the atmosphere of disbelief and, despair, and they are asking everyone to join these demonstrations. The people morale and the spirit is very high, because the women are the driving force of this, revolution against the brutal tyranny of Iran. Raisi is a mass murderer. He's been responsible for tens of thousands of executions. And, it was a big shame for the international community and for the United Nations when he entered the building of the United Nations, and those who are appeasing this religious dictatorship, they should recognize the right of the Iranian women. Although hijab is very important, the compulsory hijab, the women of Iran have always been against, this issue. But this massive movement has now gone much beyond that. And the people are asking for the overthrow of the religious dictatorship. So sooner or later, this will lead to a democratic revolution. And we support, all the women, and we ask all the people of the world to get together to impose the most punishing economic sanctions against this regime, and to recognize the right of the Iranian people to fight against this tyranny. Another important thing which I should bring to your attention is the work of the resistance units of the Iranian resistance, the PMI and the NCRI, who have been working for a number of years. Since 2014, their aim has been to shatter the wall of repression, and they are now having a very important role in leading this uprising against the mullah's regime. So the people are fighting back despite all the suppressive measures by the Revolutionary Guards.
Hussein Abedini, Deputy Director of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, thank you very much indeed for bringing us the full picture there. And, of course, we'll be back to you as we learn more about the continuing protests. Thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.
Prime Minister Liz Truss has been giving a round of broadcast interviews to regional media this morning, responding to the mini-budget last Friday.
Yeah, well, had maxi impact, as we keep saying. The Prime Minister, Chancellor, taken aback, apparently, by the volatile market reaction from the announcement. And, of course, what the Bank of England then had to do in the bond market. The Prime Minister, though, defending the mini-budget, saying it was needed to stimulate economic growth. Well, joining us now, political reporter Catherine Forster, because clearly they've got to try and explain themselves to the party at the party conference on Sunday. We know that Mel Stride, the chair of the Select Committee, won't be there. Rishi Sunak, former Chancellor, won't be there. Will there be critics able to actually challenge them about what's been going on?
I think certainly there will be. I don't think Liz Truss can be really looking forward to it. And it is astonishing, isn't it? She's only 3 and a bit weeks in the job. She should be, normally would be in a honeymoon period, people rallying behind her, keen to show their support, not happening at all. And I don't really think the radio interviews this morning helped. Obviously, she did 8 back-to-back local interviews. She's now doing a further 16 local television interviews, which we'll see later. And she doubled down. They believe categorically they are absolutely right. There's no backtracking. She stressed that this is a global problem. Certainly, the economy around the world, it is very difficult, but clearly there has been a big reaction since Friday, and she did not really address that at all in any significant way. And some reactions to it, Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, has been saying the interviews this morning made the disastrous situation even worse. Angela Rayner, very pithy. Liz Truss has finally broken her long, painful silence, because we haven't seen her for a few days, with a series of short, painful silences, and the interviews were punctuated. It's very noticeable on radio when there's a pause. One of them, there was a 4-second pause where she was asked about people's mortgages going up, and she really, really struggled to answer.
I think Conservative Party conference could be a turning point, though, and I'll tell you why. Because the Conservative Party, the way they do their conference is much more organised than the Labour Party. Because the Labour Party, they have contributions from the floor. Ordinary delegates get up and speak. But at the Conservative Party conference, it's much more, you will be addressed by all the big hitters, including Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng. They will speak, in a sense, to conference. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be dissent on the fringes, or journalists won't be looking to talk to all those Conservative MPs off the record. But in terms of the presentation and what we see on the telly, that could look quite good.
Sure. But I think it will be noticeable, won't it? All the big hitters that are not there, not just Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson. I'm sure she's incredibly relieved that he won't be there. But it is very difficult for her because she doesn't have much support. Some figures, only 113 MPs supported her for the leadership. So that's less than a third of them actually wanted her in the job in the first place. Then when she came in, when it was announced she'd won, she didn't shake Rishi Sunak's hand. She didn't appoint many supporters of other leadership candidates.
So it's style as well as substance then, because it's interesting that we've had Sir Mark Carney, former Governor of the Bank of England, Gerard Lyons, very highly regarded economist, quoted by Liz Truss, saying it was the way that they actually brought this about that's caused some of the problems, that they hadn't sort of briefed the markets, they hadn't communicated what was about to happen, and that the shock and awe really was shock and awe in what happened with the market reaction.
Yes, because really we knew a lot of what was coming, didn't we? We knew about the big energy freeze. I think it's worth saying, she did say 3 times on radio this morning that families wouldn't have to pay more than £2,500, which is not the
technically true. But
it's an average, but it's a bit of a worry. If you weren't paying close attention, you might actually think that was it, and you could...
But you could have said that about every cap, to be fair. Because every cap, you think... Because a cap has always been an average.
You should say an average, then. You shouldn't just say no family will pay more than. I think it's a bit misleading.
Just very quickly, one other point. David Gauke, former Treasury Secretary, also saying more pain yet to come, decisions on public spending. And Liz Truss talking about these efficiency savings. Is that actually cutting budgets in another sense?
It certainly sounds like it. So Chris Philp, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, will be writing to departments asking them to make savings. Really, that does equate to cuts, doesn't it?
Because of inflation.
Yes, Liz Truss had said very clearly that she wouldn't be looking to cut public spending, but that sounds different to what we're hearing now. Also, Nick Bowles, who was Conservative MP up until 2019, I think he gave the whip up over Brexit, has written saying he will now be voting Labour, and he decided...
Really? Nick Bowles?
Yeah,
but he did. I mean, it was quite it was quite a fall. Like, he crossed the floor.
Yeah, he did.
Like in a very dramatic fashion.
But you might have thought he might go.
He didn't do a David Gork and say, "Oh, I think."
But you might
maybe
have thought he might go to the Lib Dems. You know, it was a Brexit row, wasn't it? Then? But he has described voters. It's in the Guardian. He's described voters as lab rats in Truss and Kwarteng's ideological experiments.
Wow.
Which is quite cutting. And the thing is, the bottom line is, they are vehement supporters of the free market. They love the free market. That's what they're supportive of. But the free market, at the moment,
giving them a kicking,
doesn't seem to believe in them.
So he's supporting Labour now. He's voting Labour. He's not joining the Labour Party. What were they?
Not joining the Labour Party, but he's saying
he would now
that
vote.
he will now vote Labour
that's...
because he thinks that they have the best.
Bringing us that
Hear
detail.
it first here on GB News. Thank you very much indeed, Catherine. And we'll see what happens, of course, at the Tory Party conference, which you're going to.
And I think we both are.
I'm not. I'm staying here looking after the shop.
Catherine, I was talking about.
Now, international news. The Kremlin announcing that 4 regions that held those referendums, or sham referendums, as some have announced, will be incorporated into Russia on Friday.
The voting was held in Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, which takes up 15% of Ukraine's territory.
Well, as you're saying, those so-called referendums dismissed by Ukraine and indeed Western allies, calling them a sham. But President Putin will be attending a ceremony in the Kremlin tomorrow where documents will be signed, we're told, to incorporate those regions rather into Russia.
Joining us now from Ukraine is journalist Mircea Barbub. Forgive me if I've mispronounced your name. Please do say it for so we've got it right.
Actually, you said it perfectly. It's Mircea Barbub.
Thank you so much.
And you're the first one to say it right.
Thank you very much. So these legal steps, which will be taken tomorrow by Russia, what legal status do they have, given the international community says those referendums are a sham?
Well, the legal status here is not at question, neither in the international community's eyes, who doesn't obviously recognize these so-called referendums, nor do they have a legal grounding in Russia. They are more to do with politics and to justify the intervention and the escalation of conflict on the Russian side. And we're talking both new conscripts, as we've seen in all major cities across Russia, but also an increased military presence in eastern Ukraine. Now Putin can say, look, this is part of Russia officially. We have to defend this territory. It's within our doctrine to do so. The worrying thing about this document that's going to be signed tomorrow is if it's going to give Putin legal, moral, and political grounds to use tactical nuclear weapons. This is the worry that most people here in eastern Ukraine have. I've been traveling today from different parts of eastern Ukraine, from Kharkiv to Dnipro, where I'm at right now. I'm actually at the train station in Dnipro, and I can tell you that the train station is jam-packed. I mean, people are obviously leaving every day from eastern Ukraine, but it seems that they're doing more so today, worrying that what's coming next is going to be worse than what it was before. And before, not just before the last 6 months, but also in the last 6 years, 8 years, people have been struggling to get on with their lives in a war-torn region since 2014.
And of course, when we look elsewhere, we also have Russians trying to head to train stations on roads to get to Georgia, to get over the border and avoid the conscription. Is part of the thinking that because he can't actually mount a traditional boots on the ground armed invasion or a special invasion, that they're going to have to rely on these things such as artillery or even, as you say, tactical nuclear weapons?
Well, of course. I mean, that's obviously one of the reasons he wants to annex these regions. Another reason, I think, is it's going to give him legal rights to force or at least make some of the people living in these regions to fight against Ukraine. And now these are Ukrainian nationals. They're still Ukrainian citizens. Some of them are probably not so much pro-Kremlin. We don't really know what's going on in these regions because the access for media is quite limited. But what we know for sure is that some of them will end up fighting in their own country against their own government. And that's going to be an interesting turn to see if these people are actually going to fight, if they're going to surrender. The new conscripts coming from Russia, not the ones fleeing, obviously, the ones that were conscripted into the army. Will they fight? Will they have the morale, the supply lines and everything to enforce this annexation and to make it real?
Yeah. Mircea, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What looks to be, for the moment at least, a very peaceful Dnipro with people going around with their shopping, which is great to see. But thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB Newsday.
It's Bgc Charity Day today, an American financial services company's annual event in honour of colleagues killed in the 9/11 attacks.
Well, since its launch back in 2004, Bgc and its celebrity ambassadors raising millions for various global charitable causes. And here in London, a host of celebrities, including Damian Lewis, Holly Willoughby and Rio Ferdinand, all been raising money on a city trading floor.
Let's talk now to our reporter, Ellie Costello, who is there for us. You've been seeing lots of famous faces, Ellie.
Yes, good afternoon, Mark. Good afternoon, Gloria.
We will get Ellie Costello's back. Sorry, we lost you for a second, Ellie. You're back.
Can you hear me both now?
Yes, we can.
Fabulous. Well, welcome to Bgc Charity Day. It's been an absolutely incredible day so far. Celebrities working alongside these brokers here behind me to make millions of pounds for charity. We've seen so many celebrities come through the door already. We've had the likes of Amanda Holden, Rio Ferdinand, the actress Sadie Frost and Sam Allardyce, who we're going to hear from in just a few moments. And they're all working really hard. They're actually getting on the phones themselves, trying to persuade people to make big trades for their chosen charity. And the brokers here themselves, they're not actually making any money themselves today. All of their commission is going to go to charity. Now, this is all to pay tribute to the colleagues that they lost in the 9/11 attacks in the New York office on September the 11th, 2001. So it is a very, very sad day for many people in this office who remember those colleagues who they lost on that day. But it's part of taking a really tragic situation and turning it into something positive and making lots of money for charity. They've made almost £200 million in the last 18 years that this event has been going on for, and they're hoping to do even better this year than they ever have before. Well, earlier I spoke to football manager Sam Allardyce about why he wanted to be here today.
As always, it's electric. I mean, these lads work in this atmosphere every day, don't they, like trading. So I think the deals that they do and the quickness and the rate that they do it and the amount of money that exchanges hands when you actually ask them. I mean, I just done one deal at just 50k, you know, 5k, 4k, and everybody's doing something like that today to try and raise as much for charity, and that's what makes you feel good about coming here, you know. And I'm here for obviously MD UK, muscular dystrophy, and of course I've been supporting that on this day for quite some time now, you know, and seeing a lot of the youngsters who are suffering from the disease growing up, because I've been coming for a long time. So they were like this when now they're up here, like, I mean, and they're always very pleasant and happy, and it's really great to see them.
What is your style on the phone? I'd like to know. Do you go in hard, or do you plead, or what do you go with?
My style is trying to make sure I understand what they're saying, because it's a little bit gobbledygook for me, some of it, like you mean, but when they explain it right, then you get it out and shout it. What I like is somebody shouting out on the floor saying, after what I've said, shouting it out to the lads on the floor, and then they give a price or give an okay, and then the deal's done. And that's obviously the most important thing today.
Sounds quite thrilling.
It is good. It's good fun. Yeah.
That's Sam Allardyce there, having a great time raising lots of money for his chosen charity. I just wanted to show you that even though this started as a fund to help those affected by 9/11 and that terror attack, it now supports so many British charities as well. You'll notice here, Battersea Cats and Dogs Home, very familiar site for many of us. St Francis Hospice also are going to be donated to today. So many charities on this board that several celebrities are here supporting today. Now, they made $12 million on this charity day last year, and they're really, really hoping they can top that this year. So good luck to all of them.
Ellie.
Yeah, great stuff. Ellie, our own famous face, of course, thanks very much indeed for updating us there, and hopefully we'll get a few more people that you can get to a little later. Thanks very much indeed.
Lots more coming up for you in the next hour, but first a short break and then your news.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
on TV, on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 2 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic strategy, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond buying programme. Ms Truss says Britain has taken decisive action to help people get through a difficult winter ahead.
It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis. It was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. From next month, the typical household energy bill will rise by at least 25% to an average £2,500. Meanwhile, the government's rolling out £1.5 billion in funding to help improve energy efficiency and slash bills. The Help to Heat scheme will see around 130,000 low-income households get an energy upgrade in their home, including installing heat pumps and solar panels. It'll also help people save up to £700 a year on bills. Local authorities will be able to apply for funding from early next year. The Mayor of London has been summoned to answer questions surrounding the circumstances of the Met Commissioner's departure. The London Crime Committee has voted to formally request Sadiq Khan appears over the Windsor report investigating Dame Cressida Dick's resignation. The Commission found Mr Khan had failed to respect the dignity of Dame Cressida when she stepped down from the job earlier this year. It's the first time a mayor in office has been formally summoned in this way. The Criminal Bar Association is considering whether to ballot barristers on ending strike action following new proposals in the row over pay. The Ministry of Justice says the government is now offering a further investment of £54 million in solicitors and the Criminal Bar. The CBA hasn't confirmed the ballot, but is said to be considering the terms on offer. A US citizen accused of killing a 19-year-old motorcyclist in Northamptonshire is due to appear in a UK court for the first time. The family of Harry Dunn, who was killed in a collision outside a military base in 2019, arrived at Westminster Magistrates Court earlier. Anne Sakoulis is accused of causing death by dangerous driving. She's been granted diplomatic immunity, but is expected to appear via video link from America. Russia is to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine tomorrow, following so-called referendums on becoming part of the country. President Putin will hold a signing ceremony in Moscow for the territories across southern and eastern Ukraine, including Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. The US president has declared a major disaster in the state of Florida after a powerful storm hit the country. Joe Biden has ordered government funding to help with the recovery of Hurricane Ian, which has left nearly 2.5 million homes and businesses without power. At its strongest, it was classified a catastrophic Category 4 storm. It flooded coastal towns along the Florida's Gulf Coast and left homes in ruins with winds of up to 150 miles per hour. And another reason to call a dog a man's best friend. A new study suggests canines can sniff out stress in our sweat and breath. 4 dogs successfully identified the majority of samples that had been taken from a stressed person after they'd completed a tricky maths problem. The researchers at Queen's University Belfast hope their study will help in the training of therapy dogs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Back to Mark and Gloria.
Rhiannon, thanks very much indeed for that. Do you think that number 10 could do with a stressed dog at the moment? Because they've got a cat, haven't they?
They've got Lara the cat. They had Dylan under Boris and Carrie.
I forgot about Dylan, of course. Yeah.
Who knows where Dylan is now? He's probably a lot less stressed not being a number 10.
Yeah. However, they may need some help number 10 at the moment. Liz Truss, having faced the music, literally amid fierce criticism of her economic policy and last week's tax-cutting mini-budget, going on the airwaves this morning.
The Prime Minister has backed her Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, calling it the right plan for Britain, despite sending markets into a bit of a frenzy yesterday.
Yes, well, the Bank of England had to launch that £65 billion plan to buy government bonds to try and stabilise the economy and, we now understand, save the pensions market too.
The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, responded this morning to Liz Truss's comments by saying the Prime Minister's interviews this morning have made this disastrous situation even worse. Her failure to answer questions about what will happen with people's pensions and mortgages will leave families across the country facing huge worry.
And this is what the Shadow Chief Shadow Chief to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News earlier this morning.
That was unforced. The government didn't have to do this, and they chose to implement a series of measures which have resulted in enormous financial and economic instability, starting with the fall in the value of the pound, spreading through the mortgage market, where we've seen banks and building societies withdraw hundreds of products. And yesterday, we almost had a situation where major pension funds were running into trouble. So this has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country.
Joining us on the show now is Stephen Timms, former Labour Chief Secretary to the Treasury, long-serving Labour MP and Chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee. What a long list of titles you've got. Stephen, it's great to see you on the show. Let me take you back.
Nice to see you.
To 2008 and the financial crisis. The then Labour government were arguing this is a global crisis. The Tories saying it was a financial crisis made in number 10. Today, Liz Truss is saying this is a global crisis. Interest rates are rising everywhere. Do you give her the benefit of the doubt on that? She is right that interest rates are going up in lots of major economies.
No, I don't give her the benefit of the doubt. These new Conservative policies have imploded in a pretty spectacular fashion, and unfortunately, we're all going to be paying the price for that. The problems that we're seeing in the UK are unique to the UK. Yes, there are problems around the world. The Ukraine war is causing no end of difficulties, but the kind of spectacular implosion that we've seen here in the last few days is uniquely a UK phenomenon. It's because the government has announced a big borrowing binge in order to fund tax handouts to people who are already very well off. And I mean, they seem to think that's going to promote growth in the economy. I must say it's a very, very bleak prospect that they seem to have for us. Boris Johnson, for all his faults, at least recognised that the government needed to do something about inequality. There needed to be some levelling up. The new policy seems to be the more inequality there is, the better, because it sort of drives the economy. It's a very, very unhappy prospect for the country. And the lack of any plan for how this borrowing is going to be paid for is what's triggered these terrible events of the last few days.
And Stephen, the current Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp, but also on the airwaves this morning, saying no plans to bring forward the details on this next tax or fiscal statement that we're expecting in November. Do you think that's a mistake, that perhaps that might have settled the volatility on the markets a bit more?
I think it's a terrible mistake. The government has announced the policies, and now they're saying, we'll tell you how we're going to pay for all this in a couple of months' time. Well, not surprisingly, the markets aren't impressed. I mean, one of the first things the Prime Minister did was to sack the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, Tom Scholar, who Rishi Sunak, of course, worked very closely with. And Rishi Sunak warned of these consequences of going down the road that Liz Truss said she wanted to go down. She sacked Tom Scholar, went down the road she'd said she was going to go to, and the predicted consequences have emerged as a result. I mean, ministers should listen to the advice from civil servants, even when it's telling them things they don't want to hear. And just sacking people who are bringing you bad news is a terrible way to govern, and it leads directly into the sort of problems that we're now up to our necks in.
They are expected, pressured into outlining how they will get borrowing under control when they do address the House of Commons in a more formal budget in November. It looks like public spending could be first in line for the government to attempt to show how they're going to get borrowing under control. I think there's a trap there for Labour. If Labour oppose any measures to get public spending under control, then suddenly the Labour Party could be at risk of looking like the reckless ones.
Well, we need a plan, and we will set out a plan We will not reduce the top rate of tax, abolish the 45p rate of tax. We will not cut corporation tax. That's going to cost the government £17 billion. We are going to increase the windfall tax on the £170 billion of windfall profits that the oil, gas and electricity generators have enjoyed as a result of this crisis. So we will obtain the funds, the resources that the government needs to meet its commitments. Now, as you mentioned, I chair the Work and Pension Select Committee. We keep a very close eye on what's happening to benefits. At the budget statement last Friday, I asked the Chancellor if he would give us the assurance that Rishi Sunak had given that benefits would be uprated in line with the September rate of inflation in the usual way. Rishi Sunak gave us that assurance. The new Chancellor last Friday refused to give me that assurance. And that, for me, is very, very worrying. Benefits last April went up by 3%. Inflation is now 10%. All the way through, ministers have said it'll be okay because there'll be a catch-up next April. If they're now not going to deliver that catch-up, it's going to inflict enormous hardship on very large numbers of families.
Yet another former Chief Secretary of the Treasury, David Gauke, Tory, of course, indicating that there could be more pain to come, pointing out about the likelihood of higher interest rates and the Bank of England indicating it may well have to take action. What's your assessment of this relationship between the Treasury and the Bank of England at the moment? Because clearly the bank had to really step on the gas yesterday to get this bond market situation sorted out.
Yeah, well, it's clearly pretty fraught. Mark Carney has been very critical, rightly, I think, of the behaviour of ministers, and I suspect that his thinking is reflected in the bank at the moment. David Gauke's comments I thought were interesting, partly because he was making the point that, of course, the immediate catalyst for what's gone wrong was the budget last Friday, but it is the culmination of a period when questionable claims have been made by the government about the trajectory for the economy. And I think it is right to look back on some of the decisions and announcements that have been made over the last couple of years to explain why things have gone so spectacularly wrong in the last few days.
Stephen Timms, thank you very much indeed for your time and your assessment as well. Thanks for joining us here on GB Newsday.
We're joined now by the economist Julian Jessop, who's advised Liz Truss on economic policy. Julian Jessop, did she follow your advice? Did she deliver all you suggested?
Well, first of all, I would love to have a therapy dog. I'll look into that later. But I'm going to start with the positives. I think the overall economic strategy under the Truss administration has actually been very good. So the important things that have been done, and the ones actually that have cost the biggest amount of money, first of all was the energy price guarantee. And the second was the cancellation of the planned tax increases, including the increase in corporation tax and reversing the hike in national insurance. And those two big steps together, I think, are very important in preventing a deep recession. And it's not just me that's saying that, it's others like the National Institute of Economic and Social Research who've made those points as well. In addition, they've launched a pretty far-reaching programme of structural reforms, which is what's really necessary to boost growth over the medium to longer term and get productivity up. So I think overall, the economic policy has been very good. The problem is how the markets have interpreted it. And I think there is one mistake that has been made, which was the decision to pre-announce the cuts in income tax and particularly the abolition of the 45p additional rate of income tax. Now, as it happens, that's a tiny part of the package, maybe sort of 2 billion out of, say, 100 billion. But it's a real shame that we're having to spend all our time talking about that. And including that in a package when you don't have the full OBR forecasts and all the other analysis. I think that's what's really spooked the markets. But to turn an end still on a more positive note, actually the markets have since stabilised. Admittedly, it required that exceptional intervention by the Bank of England in the gilt market, but the pound seems to have found a floor and the bond market has settled down. So hopefully after that massive initial wobble, things will now be a lot calmer.
Yeah, and let's bear in mind, it's taxpayers' money, 65 billion, that's being underwritten by the Treasury, so therefore we could end up paying for it ourselves. But looking back at what happened, Gerard Lyons, another economist, saying it's not necessarily, as he was saying, that growth plan. It was the way that it was communicated or not communicated, and the fact it didn't have the OBR seal of approval, if you like, stamped on it.
Well, I think that's right. Actually, just to correct a couple of points on the Bank of England intervention.
Yeah.
First of all, there was no risk of pension funds going bust here. This wasn't an issue of solvency. It was an issue of liquidity. Basically, they were having to sell gilts in order to raise cash to offset margin calls on positions elsewhere in the market.
Some of them were saying they literally didn't have the liquidity, i.e. the cash, to carry on doing that yesterday. They were literally running out of money.
Well, no, but they could continue doing that by selling gilts. That would have been, and then the problem would have been the knock-on effect of that on the rest of the economy. But there was no real danger of any major pension funds going under. It was more that the knock-on effect of their response to that would ripple through the gilt market and have a big impact on mortgage costs and corporate bond costs and so on. So I just think it's important to correct the idea that pension funds were about to go bust. As to the idea that the taxpayer is on the hook for 65 billion, and actually that's not necessarily right either. The Bank of England is going to buy a certain amount of bonds, but only hold them for a very short period. It wouldn't actually surprise me if they end up making a profit, if bond prices rise as a result of their intervention. And in any event, the alternative would be worse. If the Bank of England hadn't done what it had done, and that would have triggered much bigger problems in the economy, that would have been a far bigger risk for the taxpayer than anything the Bank of England is doing.
And just to put the government's defence, which is effectively the market volatility, is absolutely nothing to do with the budget that they announced last Friday. Can they say that with a straight face?
Well, I mean, I've got some sympathy with that. I mean, we are in a sort of a febrile mood in global markets. I mean, the dollar has been strong across the board and interest rates have been rising everywhere. But there's no doubt at all that there's an additional premium for uncertainty in UK assets. And, the pound has fallen more than many of our peers. And in particular, and I'm actually more concerned about this, bond yields have risen further than many of our peers. I think you can shrug off currency weakness because currency markets go up and down all the time, and there are at least a few winners from a weaker currency. It's good for exporters. But rising bond yields, long-term interest rates are good for nobody, and I think that's where I'll be more focused my concerns.
Julian Jessup, thanks very much indeed for your time and bringing us your view on that. More reaction, of course, to come on that. But let's just bring you some breaking news now that's coming through. It's been now reaffirmed that the Queen's death certificate has shown that a cause of death officially was old age.
Yes, the document published by the National Records of Scotland records that the late monarch died at 3:10 on September the 8th at Balmoral Castle.
Yeah, and we'll obviously reflect on the fact that we saw those pictures as she met both Boris Johnson and indeed Liz Truss in that sitting room in Balmoral Castle, where, although she had the stick, she was still smiling, but clearly the indication was that she did actually overnight cancel, if you remember, the virtual meeting with the Privy Council. Very important thing for her to have undertaken. But clearly, I think the doctor's saying that she needed to rest. And then it was that following morning where obviously her condition deteriorated.
And we'll be talking to our royal reporter about all the details after this short break.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine Thursday for most places. A little bit warmer than recent days as well because the winds are a touch lighter. But make the most of today because wet and windy weather is on the way, brewing up out here in the Atlantic. Still got a fair distance to travel, however. That is arriving tomorrow. Today we've got a couple of weather fronts. This one's clearing away, brought some heavy rain overnight. Disappearing now from the Channel Islands. And there's another line of showers just coming in across parts of Lincolnshire into northwest England, and that'll develop into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia this afternoon. So a scattering of showers here, but elsewhere most places dry, some sunny spells. It's still a touch below average for most, with mid to high teens at best, but the winds are lighter than they have been, and it doesn't feel too bad in the sunny spells. Those showers will drift further across the Midlands through this evening before tending to fizzle out. One or two keeping going into North Norfolk for a while, but most having a dry Friday evening. And with the clear skies across England and Wales, we'll see some fog patches developing. Quite a chilly night here as well, but All change in the northwest. Those weather fronts arrive, bringing a very different day on Friday across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Rain from the word go for Northern Ireland, spreading across Scotland. Heavy bursts of rain and gusty winds, particularly initially across northwest Scotland and then across northeast Scotland in the afternoon. Turning windy across England and Wales. East Anglia, the southeast, probably won't see any rain until very late in the day, but elsewhere we'll see that wet weather arriving across England and Wales during the afternoon. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with that wind and heavy rain, which will push quickly-ish across the country. So we're looking at 3-4 hours worth of rain, eventually getting to East Anglia and the southeast during Friday evening. So bear that in mind if you are heading out. As we head into the weekends, well, still blustery on Saturday, but not as windy, with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Not many showers in the east, dry and bright for most of us on Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB Newsday. Let's just recap on this breaking news that we're getting from Scotland, that the official document released by the National Records there has shown that the Queen's official death certificate has revealed that the Queen died from old age, and that her official time of death on Thursday, September the 8th, was at 3:10. That's just coming through.
Our royal reporter Cameron Walker is at Windsor. Cameron, can you tell us any more about what we know from the publication of the death certificate?
Yes, so it was released by the National Records of Scotland just in the last 20-25 minutes or so, and on the surface it looks like any ordinary death certificates that anybody in the British Isles would get upon their death, but of course she was an extraordinary lady, Her Majesty the Queen. As you said, she died at 3:10 in the afternoon at Balmoral Castle on the 8th of September. And I think what's truly heartbreaking is that this confirms that Prince William, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, and Prince Andrew, and indeed Prince Harry, did not make it in time to Balmoral to say goodbye to Her Majesty the Queen, because according to Flight Radar 24, on the day of Her Majesty's death, their RAF plane, apart from Prince Harry, who was on a separate plane, arrived at Abedini Airport at 3:50 p.m. On that afternoon, which obviously means Her Majesty the Queen had been dead for 40 minutes by the time their plane landed. The Princess Royal signed the death certificate a few days following Her Majesty the Queen's death. We know the Princess Princess Royal accompanies Her Majesty's coffin from Balmoral to Edinburgh, and then on that RAF C-17 aircraft from Edinburgh Airport down to RAF Northolt, the same plane that carried the troops who had lost their lives in Afghanistan. Quite a fitting journey for Her Majesty the Queen. So that's what we know so far from the death certificates. But I think what truly what kind of stands out for me is it does confirm that time delay for members of the royal family getting up to Scotland to say their final goodbyes.
Press Association reporting that it was Douglas James Allen Glass who is the certifying registered medical practitioner. Old age, the only cause of death listed with no other contributing factors. Now, of course, it was the case, remember, Karen. There was a lot of conjecture, of course, because the palace had been saying that she'd been suffering with these episodic problems with mobility.
Yes, they've been saying for almost a year now that the Queen was suffering with what they described as episodic mobility problems. I think to you or I, that means she had good days and bad days with her movements. But even in the weeks running up to Her Majesty's death, there was nothing to suggest that anything else was particularly wrong with her. The palace keep medical details of members of the royal family very private, understandably. They are private individuals as well as members of the royal family, but of course she was Her Majesty the Queen, and therefore there was a big public interest in the health of our sovereign who reigned over us for 70 years. But just 2 words, as you said, Mark, on the death certificate. It just said old age, which can mean perhaps anything to a lot of people, but I think perhaps we're not going to get any more details as to exactly what Her Majesty the Queen died of. I think we have to accept that that is the information we're going to get.
Indeed.
And Cameron, you're outside Windsor Castle because hundreds of people have been queuing to see the final resting place of Queen Elizabeth II.
Yes, Windsor Castle opened its gates at 10 o'clock this morning, the first time it has opened to the public since the death of Her Majesty the Queen. Even before the gates opened, there were hundreds of people queuing to get into the Windsor Castle compound to see St George's Chapel, which houses the annex of King George VI Memorial Chapel, where Her Majesty the Queen was finally interred, along with her late husband, her mother and father, and sister as well. I've been speaking to a couple of people who have been coming out of the complex here at Windsor Castle, and they were visibly moved and said it was an incredible experience to see Her Majesty the Queen's final resting place. A new black ledger stone inscribing the names of her husband, and King George VI and the Queen Mother there, as well as the Garter Star. Of course, all 4 of them were members of the most noble order of the Garter, the oldest and most noble order of chivalry in Britain, and St George's Chapel behind me is the spiritual home of that order. People were told to were queuing for St George's Chapel, and similar to lying in state, actually, they're only allowed to spend a short amount of time physically looking into the very small King George VI Memorial Chapel because there were so many people they were trying to get through, and tickets are time allocated, of course, so there were 10 o'clock slots, 10:30, 11 and so on. But there were a lot of people to get through. But I think overall the atmosphere here has been very much one of paying tribute and paying respects to Her Majesty the Queen and seeing her final resting place for the first time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, Cameron, that when we see those pictures of that ledger stone, it's a very intimate setting, isn't it? We saw, of course, the service and the interment and the huge sort of majesty, if you like, of the chapel itself. But then you've got this sort of ante-room, and clearly people are seeing a very personal part of the monarch's life there.
Yes, personal is a great way to describe it. It's a tiny little chapel. I've been there myself, not since Her Majesty had passed away, but it really is small and intimate. You can really picture members of the royal family going there to pay their private respects to members of their own family. And then, of course, it is a very small annex attached to this massive St George's Chapel, which has been home to many funerals and as well as weddings, some happy times and sad times. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, of course, were married in that chapel, as well as Princess Eugenie and her husband Jack Brooksbank, who's one of Prince Andrew's daughters. So it's got a lot of history, that chapel. And this King George VI Memorial Chapel is actually a relatively new part of the chapel. It was only installed, I think, I can't remember the exact dates, but it was relatively recent compared to the ancient chapel that we see behind me. Certainly it was in the 20th century. So I think a lot of people have been passing through. Foreign tourists, of course, yes, who had tickets anyway, but I think many Brits here today have come to pay their respects specifically to see Her Majesty's final resting place.
Cameron at Windsor, as ever, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that. Thank you.
Now, one of the most dangerous storms in US history is currently battering Florida with winds of up to 150 miles per hour. We'll have the latest on that, but right now it's time for your news with Rhiannon.
Gloria, thank you. It's 2:32. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic strategy, calling Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England launched a £65 billion government bond buying programme in an attempt to stabilise the UK economy. Liz Truss says her government's taken decisive action to help people get through a difficult winter ahead.
It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis. It was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. From next month, the average household energy bill will rise by at least 25% to an average £2,500. The Queen's cause of death has been revealed as old age, according to her death certificate. The document, signed by her daughter Princess Anne, records her time of death as 3:10 p.m. on September the 8th. Hundreds of people are currently queuing outside Windsor Castle to see the Queen's final resting place. It's the first opportunity for the public to view her ledger stone in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Russia is to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine following so-called referendums. President Vladimir Putin is to hold a signing ceremony in Moscow tomorrow for the 4 territories, which include Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark and Gloria will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Let's bring you some breaking news. We're getting on the case of Harry Dunn, who was killed by a driver, a case of alleged dangerous driving. Ansa Koulas, who has given evidence from the United States by video link, granted unconditional bail. That's just been revealed, but being told by the Chief Magistrate that she must attend the next hearing, which will be at the Old Bailey on October the 27th, in person.
The family of Harry Dunn arrived at Westminster Magistrates Court ahead of the appearance of their son's alleged killer. Parents Charlotte Charles and Tim Dunn, alongside Harry's twin brother Neil, arrived there. The family said they would not be making any comment until the conclusion of criminal proceedings. Mark White, our Home Affairs and Security Editor, he is looking at all of the details for us. He is there for us, and we'll speak to him as and when.
Just to remind you, Ansa Koulas, 45-year-old, accused of killing Harry when he was on his motorbike outside a US military base in Northamptonshire back in August 2019. That was the scene at the roadside there. Basically, she claimed diplomatic immunity and was able to leave the UK 19 days after that accident. And the hearing today, just 6 minutes long. She spoke only to confirm her name, says Press Association, and date of birth. Harry's parents were there at the court hearing, but said would not be commenting on the case until the conclusion of criminal proceedings. As you said, Old Bailey now, October the 27th.
Well, it's been First Minister's questions today. Nicola Sturgeon has been in Holyrood taking questions from members of the Scottish Parliament. She has faced questions over the decision to allow shipbuilders, Ferguson Marine, a £97 million contract to build 2 ferries in Port Glasgow.
Yes, we talked about this yesterday, of course, on the programme. They were handed the contract to construct those vessels back in 2015, despite concerns it didn't offer value for money. Well, neither of the ferries have been finished yet, and the cost of the project massively increasing. So now, 5 years late, £150 million over budget at the moment.
Now the SNP government is facing accusations of giving preferential treatment in the ferry contracting to Ferguson Marine. Here's a clip of Nicola Sturgeon at First Minister's questions just a short while ago, defending the decision and saying ministers have not yet reviewed Ferguson's massive increase in costs.
Firstly, in terms of the delivery schedule, the target date for 801 has not changed. The target date for 802, there is an estimated further slippage of 1 to 2 months. On costs, Ferguson's has set out its latest estimate of cost, but this is the key point. Ministers have yet to properly scrutinise that estimate, so no decision has yet been taken about any further increase in the budget for the ferries. As that process of due diligence, which government has to undertake, is completed, we will update Parliament in the normal way. That is what we will continue to do as we work to continue to support the shipyard, to support the completion of the ferries, and yes, to support the jobs that depend on that shipyard.
Joined now by Michael Blackley, who's the political editor of the Scottish Daily Mail, who's been following the day's events. I'm sure the First Minister spoke about lots of things, but let's just explore this issue of the ferry contract, first of all. How serious are the questions she faces?
Yeah, so this is a really serious issue. The issue of the ferries fiasco, as it's been termed, has been something that there's been a lot of discussion about some of the actions of the Scottish Government ministers and their quangos for a number of years since it was awarded in 2015. So it was a big issue at First Minister's questions today, as it often is, but this really developed this week because there was a BBC documentary earlier on this week, which raised concerns that the contract may have been rigged. So Nicola Sturgeon was told by the Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross today that there was a stench of corruption about this, a stench of political corruption, because he was raising questions about why there seemed to be preferential treatment that was given to a very prominent businessman in 2015 who had supported the independence campaign and indeed was also a member of the First Minister's Council of Economic Advisers. So now that this documentary has raised concerns about the way that it was awarded, about the bidder, the Ferguson shipyard, getting preferential treatment, getting access to documents which suggested how the contract should be operated before they submitted their final bid.
Right.
They also copied and pasted some of the elements of documents that they had seen into their bid. So huge questions. Nicola Sturgeon was questioned about it today and denied that there had been any fraud in this case.
And Michael, explain to us, what's the situation north of the border there? Is there any equivalent to the National Audit Office, a watchdog overseeing how government spending is carried out?
Yes, so there's the Auditor General for Scotland, and Audit Scotland are the public spending watchdogs. So after these revelations emerged on Tuesday, the Deputy First Minister confirmed that the top civil servant in Scotland had referred issues and evidence from this documentary to the Auditor General for Scotland, who will now decide, Audit Scotland will have a look at it and they'll decide whether to launch a full investigation into it. So they want to get to the bottom of what's been going on with this and whether there has been some of these serious wrongdoing as has been suggested.
Michael, obviously big economic news over the last few days. The Chancellor has been visiting a local business in Darlington, in the north of England. We know it's not in Scotland. Kwasi Kwarteng told the Press Association news agency, "We are sticking to the growth plan and we're going to help people with energy bills. That's my two top priorities." The Press Association reporting that a few minutes ago. I just wondered what Nicola Sturgeon had said in response to the economic turmoil, which has now calmed, it has to be said, over the last few days, and some negative criticism to that budget.
Yeah, so this was very much the issue that, of course, Nicola Sturgeon wanted to be talking about at First Minister's questions today. She raised it with Douglas Ross when he was raising issues about Ferguson ferries. So she has repeatedly criticised the UK government. She's talked about the chaos that she says has been caused by some of the announcements from last week. The Scottish Government, of course, it needs to respond itself. The UK Government's unveiled a package of tax measures, and whether the Scottish Government likes these policies or not, any big tax gap between Scotland and the rest of the UK can have a quite big impact. So while she's been critical of the policies, she also did say today that in her words, we will not emulate these policies. So a suggestion that there might be a growing tax divide, but of course there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly the impact that it's had and whether there's going to be a continuing impact. And today we also heard from Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross raising some concerns about the policies that have been introduced, which is the first that he has done that as well.
Michael, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Michael Blackley from the Scottish Daily Mail there at the Scottish Parliament building. Thank you.
Now, scientists have discovered that dogs are able to smell stress in our breath as well as our sweat.
Nice. 4 pet dogs volunteered by their owners, then trained to choose one of 3 scent canisters. Well, in more than 650 out of 700 trials, yes, they managed to successfully identify the samples of sweat and breath that have been taken from a stressed person.
And this is science, you know, because it's the research conducted at Queen's University Belfast. They say they hope their study will help train therapy dogs.
Well, joining us now is Colin Tennant, who's a dog behaviourist. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Clearly, dogs are used in all sorts of circumstances, sniffing for explosives, and they've helped with various medical conditions. So is this actually a surprise?
No, it's not a surprise. I've worked with many hundreds of dogs in scent using their olfactory system. And what this study is suggesting is another way of trying to get indicators that the dog from the dog, which can be used in therapy dogs. It's a very small study at this stage, but I'm not surprised at all.
How can we make good use, societal use of these findings? How can they help people?
Well, they haven't really set that out. Probably can give you an example of something that happened with me with a student from our college, a police officer whose dog saved their life through scent, through the scent molecules that they were giving off. And this policewoman had a dog which kept pestering her night after night. It started and then gradually increased, and the dog was sniffing round her genital area, and obviously that was embarrassing. And she kept pushing the dog away, and the dog kept coming back. This increased, and to cut the story short, eventually she got so embarrassed by the dog doing this, especially in company, she went to a doctor and found she had cancer. And the dog saved her life. That's the power of the dog's olfactory system.
Just looking at this particular issue on stress, I mean, how would that work in terms of, would you have a dog stress counsellor, for instance?
I don't really know, because they haven't said or laid out how it could work. I know quite a bit about therapy dogs, but there are other indicators that dogs pick up which are not in this study, but we already know. So your body movements, anybody who owns a pet dog watching GB News will know that dogs are excellent at looking at your body movements, and they can detect changes in your, if you wish, stress or your mental state by the way you enter the house, your tonology. These are clear signals to a dog, and your general behaviour. So dogs can observe, as amazing creatures as they are, they can observe all sorts of things which are easier to discern and we can use that we already have. Right. This may add another method, and it may work. At the moment, they're a little bit short on how it could be practically implemented.
Right. The reason I was asking you, is there a danger that the dog itself could get stressed if they're put into these situations?
I shouldn't think so. Dogs are pretty robust. If you come in a bad mood because you've been in traffic in London, and you're showing that bad mood, dogs normally kind of avoid you until you've calmed down, and you will be, according to this study, be giving off molecules of stress from your body. So dogs can already sense it. It's just how you use it practically. Dogs are just great observers of humans, and what I've said many times is, and they should be, because generally dogs have got all day after they've eaten and had their walk to watch you. We don't tend to watch them. They're great observers, and hopefully something may come of this study.
Can I make a confession to you? So when I had a dog, I tell you what used to make me stressed. When I'd left the dog in the house, only for like an hour or something, so I would be constantly stressed, worrying about the dog, whether the dog was bored or chewing something or upset or lonely. So I think I needed a therapy dog to cope with the stress of worrying about my dog being on its own. Would my dog have been happy on their own when I left them on their own to go shopping?
Well, I think most dogs, being a pack animal, are happier with us. That's how they operate, but they're adaptive, very adaptive. And the stress you were exhibiting is stress I have when I leave my dog who sat down here. And sometimes when I go out, especially if I'm out more than 2 hours, I work from home a lot now in our film studio, so I tend to be with him and I do think about him.
Colin,
so I think
we've got to leave you there.
It's just something we can deal with.
We've got to just interrupt you. Thank you for joining us, because we can cross now to Westminster Magistrates Court, where a spokesperson for Harry Dunn's family is speaking.
Respect the criminal justice system, and the parents will not be making any public comment at this time until the conclusion of criminal proceedings. But I just wanted to say on their behalf a massive thank you, firstly to you all for all your support over the last 3 years, and to the millions of people around the world who have supported this heroic family through this amazing campaign. And we'll see you all next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Short statement there.
Sorry, my name's Rad Seeger. I'm the advisor and spokesperson for the family of Harry Dunn.
As you're just hearing there, he's a spokesperson.
We're not making any
for the
comment
family.
on the process now. We'll have to just wait and see what the outcome is. Thank you. We're obviously very pleased and relieved to get to this point. Very pleased. Thank you. Thank you all.
To you that we are not expecting to hear from the family themselves. They have said they will not be making any statement probably until the culmination or conclusion of the criminal proceedings. But just to remind you, what's happened this morning is that we were hearing Ansa Koulas will have to attend the Old Bailey in person for the next hearing. She was giving her reaction today, not technically giving evidence as such, but
we're just waiting, sorry to interrupt you, Mark. We're just waiting for Mark White, our Home Affairs and Security Editor, who is there. But as Mark was saying, the court heard there would be a joint application from both the prosecution and defence for Koulas to appear via video link again on October the 27th. But continue to address Ansa Koulas. Chief Magistrate Paul Goldspring told the defendant she would be required to appear in person. As Mark was saying, he said that may change because there will be a joint application to allow you to attend via video link as you have today. Do you understand? Yes, Sir Koulas replied.
Yeah, just to remind you, this proceedings was at a magistrates' court, Westminster Magistrates' Court, in front of the Chief Magistrate. But Old Bailey will be a Crown Court hearing. She had claimed diplomatic immunity at one stage as a US citizen. Therefore, this was actually quite an uncommon hearing that we had at Westminster. But Mark White, our Home Affairs Editor, is there. Mark, you were indicating this is far from being a straightforward case because of these reasons.
No, I mean, we hadn't heard that Ansa Koulas had been charged, for instance, until the court proceedings were underway. And then afterwards, we had it confirmed by the prosecutor that she had actually been charged by written requisition. So by letter to her solicitors in the United States confirming that she had been charged with death by dangerous driving. So the agreement was made over many months between her legal team and between, of course, the Crown Prosecution Service in this country, in conjunction, of course, with the Foreign Office, that there would be specialist dispensation that she could appear, initially anyway, via video link. Now, the Chief Magistrate has said that he is making an order that she should appear when this is referred to the Crown Court on the 27th of October, that she should appear there in person. However, he acknowledged that there would be an application, a joint application, he described it as, that would be made both by the prosecution in this case and the defence for Ansa Koulas, which again would be asking for this special dispensation where the proceedings could continue with Ansa Koulas appearing via a video link. And we've every reason to believe that in the fullness of time that process will continue. As far as the charge he's facing, interestingly, her defence team said in court that she intends to plead guilty to a lesser charge of death by careless driving. Now, of course, death by dangerous driving has a maximum jail term of some 14 years in prison. Death by careless driving has a maximum jail term of 5 years in prison and, of course, can be dealt with in terms of a community sentence. So, as I say, she is due to appear probably by video link at the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey, on the 27th of October.
Mark, at Westminster Magistrates Court, thanks very much for being an update on us.
Now, coming up next, it's GB News Live with Patrick Christies, but thank you for watching or listening to Mark and I today. Before that, it's your weather.
I'm Alex Deacon with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine Thursday for most places. A little bit warmer than recent days as well because the winds are a touch lighter. But make the most of today because wet and windy weather is on the way, brewing up out here in the Atlantic. Still got a fair distance to travel, however. That is arriving tomorrow. Today we've got a couple of weather fronts. This one's clearing away, brought some heavy rain overnight, disappearing now from the Channel Islands. And there's another line of showers just coming in across parts of Lincolnshire into northwest England, and that'll develop into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia this afternoon. So a scattering of showers here, but elsewhere most places dry, some sunny spells. It's still a touch below average for most, with mid to high teens at best, but the winds are lighter than they have been, and it doesn't feel too bad in the sunny spells. Those showers will drift further across the Midlands through this evening before tending to fizzle out, one or two keeping going into North Norfolk for a while, but most having a dry Friday evening. And with the clear skies across England and Wales, we'll see some fog patches developing. Quite a chilly night here as well, but all change in the northwest. Those weather fronts arrive, bringing a very different day on Friday across Scotland, Northern Ireland. Rain from the word go for Northern Ireland, spreading across Scotland. Heavy bursts of rain and gusty winds, particularly initially across northwest Scotland and then across northeast Scotland in the afternoon. Turning windy across England and Wales. East Anglia, the southeast, probably won't see any rain until very late in the day, but elsewhere we'll see that wet weather arriving across England and Wales during the afternoon. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with that wind and heavy rain, which will push quickly-ish across the country. So we're looking at 3-4 hours worth of rain, eventually getting to East Anglia and the southeast during Friday evening. So bear that in mind if you are heading out. As we head into the weekends, well, still blustery on Saturday, but not as windy, with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Not many showers in the east, dry and bright for most of us on Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello everybody, it's GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's, with you all the way through until 6 p.m. Loads to get stuck into this afternoon, including the Prime Minister has now doubled down, you love to see it, on her commitment to tax cuts and increased borrowing, despite days of turmoil. So Liz Truss defended last week's mini-budget earlier, claiming the UK is on a better trajectory for the long term. Is she right? And do financial markets still have faith in her and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng? Also this hour, we'll cross live to Westminster Magistrates Court as a US citizen accused of killing a 19-year-old motorcyclist outside a US military base in Northamptonshire appeared for the first time. And Sakoulis, yes, we all remember this, don't we, is allegedly accused of causing death by dangerous driving, but has been granted diplomatic immunity. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, will bring you the very latest on that. And are we a nation of lazy fat carb... Who wrote that? Lazy fat carb lovers? Yes, OK, thank you very much. A YouGov poll suggests that us Brits get less sleep, do less sport and are fatter than most other countries. Is it time for some tough love and a crackdown on our obesity problem? But before all of that, here's your latest headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Queen's cause of death has been given as old age on her death certificate. The document, signed by Princess Anne, also records her time of death as 10 past 3 on the afternoon of September the 8th. Hundreds of people are currently queuing outside Windsor Castle to see the Queen's final resting place. It's the first opportunity for the public to view her ledger stone in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. The Chancellor is insisting the government's sticking to the growth plan despite criticism of his mini-budget. Speaking during a visit to Darlington earlier, Kwasi Kwarteng added that his economic plan is going to help people with energy bills. His comments follow the Prime Minister's defence this morning of Mr Kwarteng's strategy, calling it the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond buying programme. Liz Truss says Britain's taken decisive action to help people get through a difficult winter ahead.
It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis. It was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. From next month, the typical household energy bill will rise by at least 25% to an average £2,500. Meanwhile, the government's rolling out £1.5 billion in funding to help improve energy efficiency and slash bills. The Help to Heat scheme will see around 130,000 low-income households get an energy upgrade in their home, including installing heat pumps and solar panels. It'll also help people save up to £700 a year on bills. Local authorities will be able to apply for funding from early next year. The Mayor of London has been summoned to answer questions surrounding the circumstances of the Met Commissioner's departure. The London Crime Committee has voted to formally request that Sadiq Khan appears over the Windsor report investigating Dame Cressida Dick's resignation. The Commission found Mr Khan had failed to respect the dignity of Dame Cressida when she stepped down from the job earlier this year. It's the first time a mayor in office has been formally summoned in this way. The Criminal Bar Association is considering whether to ballot barristers on ending strike action following new proposals in the row over pay. The Ministry of Justice says the government's now offering a further investment of £54 million in solicitors and the criminal bar. The CBA hasn't confirmed the ballot, but is said to be considering the terms on offer. The US citizen accused of killing 19-year-old Harry Dunn has appeared in a UK court for the first time, ending his family's 3-year wait for criminal proceedings to begin. Harry Dunn was killed in a collision outside a military base in Northamptonshire in 2019. Anne Sekulis, who's charged with causing death by dangerous driving, appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link. She's been granted unconditional bail until the case is heard at the Old Bailey at the end of October, when she's been told to appear in person. Russia is to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine tomorrow, following so-called referendums on becoming part of the country. President Putin will hold a signing ceremony in Moscow for the territories across southern and eastern Ukraine, including Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. The US president has declared a major disaster in the state of Florida after a powerful storm hit the country. Joe Biden has ordered government funding to help with the recovery of Hurricane Ian, which has left nearly 2.5 million homes and businesses without power. At its strongest, it was classified a catastrophic Category 4 storm. It flooded coastal towns along Florida's Gulf Coast and left homes in ruins, with winds of up to 150 miles per hour. And another reason to call a dog a man's best friend. A new study suggests canines can sniff out stress in our sweat and breath. 4 dogs successfully identified the majority of samples that have been taken from a stressed person after completing a tricky maths problem. The researchers at Queen's University Belfast hope their study will help in the training of therapy dogs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Patrick.
Yes, hello everybody. Right, so the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has insisted that the government is sticking to the growth plan and that it is going to help people with energy bills. His comments come hours after the Prime Minister Liz Truss doubled down on her commitment to tax cuts and increased borrowing